Capetonian author Paula Marais is joining me in studio to chat about her brand new book, Shadow Self. Paula, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I know you had some trouble with parking, so I'm glad you're here. All right.
It's not parking, it's finding the parking.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy here. So Shadow Self is your second book.
It's my third novel and various other non-fiction books as well.
All right, so I know the first non-fiction book you wrote was on the same subject, postnatal depression.
Postnatal distress, yeah.
And now you've written it in a novel, in a fiction story. How did you make that transition from non-fiction to fiction?
Well, you know, I didn't really see it as a transition because I saw them as two separate things. Yeah. Because originally, when I started writing Shadow Self, it was more from the postnatal psychosis point of view that I wanted to write it, which I hadn't researched and hadn't experienced. So for me, it's, I mean, I'm a journalist by training, and I love doing the research. So it's more for me, the research helps inform the book, but it's not what the book is, if you know what I mean.
I want to touch on the research in a little bit.
Yeah.
Why did you choose postnatal psychosis?
Well, I wanted to write a subject about a book about a person who commits a terrible crime or does something terrible, but isn't necessarily a terrible person. So this whole idea of going completely against what should be instinct to protect one's children and do something awful to one's children was something that totally fascinated me. Being a very committed mother, I couldn't imagine being pushed to that point, and I wanted to understand it a bit better.
Did you suffer from postnatal depression?
I did suffer from postnatal distress more than depression, but that was after the birth of my second child, and I didn't suffer it nearly as badly as Thea, my character, did. But I did have enough to inform me of how it feels to be in your body but not really in your body, if you know what I mean, and not recognizing yourself within the way you felt about things and the way you were handling stuff. I mean, I definitely felt like there was this other person who had occupied my body while I was with this hormonal imbalance, and everything was just a bit, you know, had gone a bit pear-shaped, basically. And so I have experienced it, but certainly not at the same sort of levels.
Now I want to talk about Clay and Sanusha in just a second, but was there anything you found out while interviewing your psychiatrist, while doing the research for Thea, that you thought was just very shocking, you couldn't believe?
Well, I think you're going to chat to Linda Lewis, and if you do, she told me a story about a patient who tried to ride over her child with her 4x4 on the sand on a beach, and luckily the baby survived completely because the sand was so soft. She rode over it, but the sand protected the baby.
Wow.
But to get to that point that you would do something that awful to your child, and obviously a lot of the stories that I read, not necessarily talking to psychiatrists, but there's a book called Mothers Who Kill, and or Women Who Kill, I can't remember which one. I think it's Mothers Who Kill. And that just had so many stories. You actually felt like you wanted to vomit after reading some of these stories, because they were just so heinous and so horrible.
How does postnatal psychosis develop? How do you...
It's basically a hormonal imbalance that happens. So it's triggered by your estrogen. You have a surge in estrogen when you give birth, and then a massive drop. So it's that, and then in combination with the adrenal glands and the thyroid. Obviously, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but it's triggered by that, but also triggered by previous experiences, etc. But it is actually a disease that can be treated with antipsychotics, with antidepressants, etc. So it's totally treatable with medication if you catch it early. Obviously, there are certain medications you can't have while you're breastfeeding, etc. So you would have to be. I mean, after I had my both my children, I didn't have postnatal depression with the first one, but I had issues. And both cases I had to be taken off from breastfeeding because of having to take certain medications. So you have to get weaned off that. But I mean, babies that go in bottles, it's not the end of the world. You'd rather have a happy mother.
Exactly, happy family.
Happy family, happy mother, happy family. That's what they say anyway.
Now, the book is quite dark.
Yes.
I've
been told.
Yeah. I'm always interested to hear from authors, because they always come in and they're always so bubbly, and it's just like, oh yeah, the book. How do you get to that place where you can write something that's so believably dark?
Well, you actually get into that dark space. Like sometimes it would hang over me for a few days, and I'd feel actually quite miserable. But and I think you have to get to that dark place, otherwise it's not believable. You know, it's sort of like people saying when you write a sex scene, if you don't get turned on by the sex scene, it's a rubbish sex scene.
Yeah.
then don't write it, because it's the same thing as the dark side of things. If it doesn't feel dark and you don't feel it here, then it hasn't happened to you. So it certainly does affect you emotionally. And when I got to at some parts you almost put off because you know this is coming.
Yeah.
So the scene that everybody sort of reads to the back to see what happens, which is I won't tell you what happens. That scene was extremely hard to write, but I knew from the beginning how it was going to be and what was going to happen. So maybe that made it slightly easier because I'd already almost processed it emotionally by the time it happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Now, is this story finished for you, or do you plan to?
No, I think I don't really like to write sequels, to be honest. A lot of people have said, "Oh, I want to hear what happens to Clay," and you know, or how does Snusha turn out later on? Because having such a background, how does this person become? Maybe I'll return to them later, but for the moment, I'm working on something else.
Okay, can you give us any spoilers for that something else?
Oh, the book I'm writing now is a woman who comes from Zimbabwe. She's a refugee, black, Shona. So quite challenging for me. Obviously, I'm not black or Shona. So that's a real challenge. I'm doing a lot of research for that. You know, Shona superstitions, etc. Basically, she comes to South Africa, and it's her experience in a white family and falling in love with the children of this white family.
Wow.
And there's an adoption issue. So it's kind of a tussle. It's kind of who should the real mother be, I suppose.
Cool, I can't wait.
Yeah.
Okay, so how can people find your book and find out more about you?
Okay, to find out more about me, I've got a website, paulamarais.com, so it's PaulaMarais.com, or I'm on Facebook, Paula J. Marais on Facebook, or I'm on Twitter, Paula_Marais. Or, I think that's enough.
Pretty much we can just Google you.
Yeah, you can Google me, you'll find me. I'm Googleable.
Yes. Well, thank you for coming in. Shadow Stuff was amazing, and I hope everyone picks it up.
Great, thanks so much.